Welcome to the Reheat, the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel powered by InsideTexas.com. I'm Joe Cook. We got RT Young, and we're going to go over some of the latest news coming from the 40 acres, talking Longhorn football. We'll also talk a little bit about some funny stuff going on with the other UT as well. But make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We've been bringing updates all day, all weekend about the recruits, the scrimmage, everything, as Texas is 2/3 of the way through spring ball. We'll be bringing it throughout the course of the rest of the week. And of course, if you're not done so already, head to InsideTexas.com. You can join today for just $1. Get yourself 4 months. It's April 14th. That gets you through August 14th. That's halfway through preseason training camp. And that's sitting here right now, 2/3 of the way through spring drill. So you're going to want to stick around, get all the recruiting updates, everything that's associated with Texas football, only at Inside Texas, $1 for 4 months. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about some of the things Steve Sarkisian mentioned in a Monday press conference on the heels of a recruiting weekend, on the heels of a scrimmage. He talked about trying to build a foundation for the upcoming 2025 season. He mentioned quite a few players that we'll go over. And then, as we mentioned, got a laugh at some of our SEC rivals, although it seems like there's more attention that needs to go to one side of things as opposed to a program. But first, RT, Sark was at the mic today. At this point, we've covered the aspects of spring football being different with, trying to make it look a little bit more like OTAs, trying to keep some wear and tear off of guys, keeping guys out if they know what's going on. And that coincides big time with what Steve Sarkisian in the past has really emphasized in trying to get guys ready to maybe make a 15, 16, 17 game season. And it sounds like that process is ongoing as the practice 10 just wraps up.
I liked hearing today about Sark's philosophy when it comes to spring football, Joe. And more than just hearing about one or two particular players, I liked how he described looking at spring ball as if building a foundation or laying bricks. And he mentioned guys like Anthony Hill or Ethan Burke, DJ Campbell, who've been around the program for a little bit longer. Their stack of bricks or their foundation is maybe going to be a little bit higher than some of the newcomers, especially guys who are early enrollees, but that the idea of spring practice and of spring ball is to build on everybody's foundation. And obviously with that, you're building a foundation for the whole team that you then take into fall camp and then the rest of the season. So I think with that, he was very quick to mention that the Longhorns have 27 new faces competing in spring ball. He said he talked to Kirby Smart on the phone just a little bit before the press conference started, and he had 31. So you see that Sark is definitely, he realizes the youth on this team, and he's really wanting to, start from the bottom, build a strong foundation, rely on the leadership that he does have, and build upward.
I think something about that we hear from coaches all the time is they emphasize consistency. And as far as I can remember, and granted, this goes along with covering a team that is a college football playoff contender, we don't hear a ton, whether it's from Sark himself or whether it's through insider reports about like bad practices. And we used to hear about bad practices a lot in other eras of Texas football. But at the same time, that doesn't mean everything's perfect. He talks about how you can get a flash from somebody. Somebody can push a gap and drive a blocker into the backfield and make a tackle for loss. And then the next thing you know, hey, he's in the wrong gap and there's a 20-yard run. That's what happens. It's football. It's a lot of failure involved, but a lot of success too. And they're looking to find the consistency to make that success. And I think showing all these new players who usually are the best player on any field they walk on coming out of high school, now they're having to go against guys like Ethan Burke or even players like Trevor Gooseby or go against even some guys like Parker Livingstone, Kobe Black, just to name a few, Andrew Makuba, Trey Wisner, those types of guys who have done it for a little bit longer. These guys are learning what to do and how to do it better. And just to go back even to some of the talking to recruits and talking to some sources who were able to view the scrimmage, there are some guys who get this a little bit quicker than others. And one of the guys I was surprised to hear, Sark didn't mention him today, but he did mention him last week, is Nick Brooks. And Nick Brooks has the physical talent. Great example of what we're talking about. He's got the size. Like he's, Kyle Flood looked at him and it's like, yep, that's what I want to see. But does he have the fundamentals, the techniques, as Steve Sarkisian likes to say? And of course, I'm sure there are lapses, but he's a great example of someone who is starting to get it, shows that he can go against this competition. I don't know if you want to put him out there at right tackle right now, but he's a great example of someone who can show that they have these flashes. Now the next step for him, for a bunch of guys at other positions, and I'm curious maybe if there's some other guys that he mentioned that we can start diving into that stood out, that caught your attention when Sarkisian mentioned them.
I really liked hearing him talk about Warren Roberson because I feel like, you think back to a year ago when we started maybe thinking, oh, there's a chance Trey Wisner might break out a little bit. We had seen him be somebody on special teams the year before who Sark and Jeff Banks really trusted. And then obviously that translated into him being the Longhorns' leading rusher. Warren Roberson just being someone that, got a lot of special teams run last year, maybe didn't always jump off the screen because of some penalties, but was always involved and always in the thick of a lot of special teams plays, but obviously was a really highly touted athlete, can do a bunch of different things in the secondary. So I thought that was an encouraging mention. Obviously, I've noticed in the 4 years with Sark, one thing you definitely want to hear from him is you want to hear guys be brought up multiple times. Typically when he says things like splash or flash, that doesn't always mean that he has the most confidence in somebody and that he's looking for more consistency. I remember once upon a time, Tavondre Sweat was in that boat. And Tavondre Sweat was somebody that he really brought up that, oh, this guy will make a splash play and occasionally look like an NFL player, but we're looking for more consistency. And, so I think obviously you want to hear names mentioned more than once, but I thought Roberson being mentioned today was an encouraging sign.
I'm really curious how that is going to affect this secondary, because you look at the three are going to be a part of this no matter what. There may be some shifting, maybe even four, that are going to be a part of this secondary no matter what. That Manny Muhammad and Jalen Gilbo are going to be your guys on the cornerback spots. Michael Taft's going to be at one safety. Then you have to try to figure out, what do you do with Jelani McDonald? Do you keep him at safety where he's gotten some good reviews? Or do you put him at star and try to figure somebody else at safety when Derek Williams comes back? Or does maybe someone like Warren Roberson make this so it's a tough decision for guys like Dwayne Akina and Mark Orfe as they're trying to do things? And one thing that we talk about in recruiting all the time is when you're building an offensive line class, even if it's not 5 guys, you want guys for each role. You can look at Max Wright, and you can look at Nick Robertson and some of the other targets and Ojo and Turntine, and see where they're going to fit on a future offensive line. You could see that in that 2022 class that had Banks and Campbell and Hudson and stuff like that. And similar applies to secondary. You look at the guys that are going to be corners to safeties, guys that profile to star, and that was Roberson. I think you thought he would be able to hold on at corner, but he had a great amount of athleticism. I think Gary Patterson sought him out for his defense, a TCU commit for a while. Thought, okay, maybe Star could be what he looks at. And if that's the case, then you have to start figuring out, okay, how do we get our best 5 on the field? That's what you hear O-line coaches talk about. How do we get our best 5, 6 out there? It probably something applies similar for defensive backs. And one thing I'm curious about is if Roberson is able to interject himself into that conversation, if somebody else like maybe Wardell Mack is able to interject himself in that conversation, what does that start to look like for the secondary? But these become great problems to have as well. And you trust someone like Dwayne Akina to be able to figure out how to make that work. Any of the other defensive mentions from Sark that stood out to you?
I mean, obviously on the defensive side, we talked about it a couple weeks ago that every single defensive back and then multiple defenders who are now heading to the NFL when we got availability after Pro Day all mentioned Jelani McDonald. So obviously hearing his name being mentioned by Sark as a guy who's, starting to put it together. And I'm just very interested to see where he ends up, in the fall. And do they just put him in a playmaking spot because they have so many embarrassment of riches when it comes to the secondary? If guys like Roberson and guys like Kobe Black, Wardell Mack are all stepping up, then does that allow someone like Jelani McDonald, who was originally a linebacker, but is just athletic freak with a nose for the football, who's capable of making those Superman highlight plays like we saw versus Kentucky? Does he get to play more of maybe a traditional like roamer role where he can just go chase the football, be around the football, maybe even get in on some pass rushing situations, kind of similar to what we saw Jahdae Barron in the 2023 season. So I'm excited to see just how that shakes out long term.
Good thing about spring is that it's time for a little bit of an experimentation. We got an idea that whenever Derek Williams does come back, he's such a good player. Remember, he started over Andrew Makuba. In situations, they tried to fit their skill sets to the opponent, but he was starting over Andrew Makuba and was playing really strong football from Michigan, got dinged up, and then against Oklahoma before he got hurt again. It's hard for me to think he's not going to factor into this defensive secondary. But now, unfortunately, the silver lining to his injury is that you can find opportunities for Roberson. And then, like you said, you can find opportunities to see what you can do with Jelani McDonald, who played a lot of star last year and now is going to get some opportunity at safety. And I had even heard he had a good square up tackle on a goal line session during Saturday's scrimmage against his old Waco Conley teammate and Trey Wisner. I think Trey Wisner got another one on him a little bit later, but those are the types of returns you like hearing. You never have any doubt about what McDonald's going to be able to do coming downhill. I've always been curious about what he's able to do going backwards, and haven't heard a ton about guys getting beat deep. I know Arch Manning definitely tries, but you haven't heard a ton about guys getting beat deep when it comes to passing. We'll go over some of the guys on offense that Steve Sarkisian mentioned, but before we do, got to show some love to our sponsor, and that is Laura Baker.
Hi, I want to tell you about Laura Baker. If you're looking for a new home in the 512 or even at this point, let's face it, 737 area code, there's only one number to call. That's Laura Baker at 512-784-0505. As a member of the elite Andy Allen team with Keller Williams, Laura has helped Longhorns find the home of their dreams in Central Texas. Just ask our resident sex symbol, Ian Boyd, who moved all the way from Michigan to Texas with Laura's help. Laura can help you find what you're looking for in the 512, the 737, or even parts of the 254 and the 210. Just, give her a call at 512-784-0505. Her email is in the description as well as the rest of her contact details. She's a friend. Give her a call.
Thank you, LC. One of the guys who's drawn a good amount of attention, especially with how the tight end position looks right now. And I think Eric over on Inside Texas has put it great and said, wow, that 2026 tight end room is going to be great. Part of that is because of what this guy's been doing. It's Amari Winston, a true freshman from, I believe, from Florida. No, he's from Calhoun, Georgia. That's right. And that's someone who is getting opportunities in a variety of roles. And Sarkisian likes what he's seen from him so far.
Yeah, Amari Winston, obviously, is benefiting off the opportunity of some more playing time with Jordan Washington getting hurt in spring practice, Nick Townsend not being on campus yet because he's a summer enrollee, and then guys like Spencer Shannon have maybe their role is more defined. They're that traditional inline blocking tight end, and Arch Manning and Steve Sarkisian really need a weapon in the fall like we had the last two seasons with Gunnar Helm and Jatavian Sanders. So I think he's, you don't really see true freshmen typically play a lot in this offense, but obviously he's getting a chance to perform really on an island right now in front of his coaches. So it's a big opportunity for him. I've really only gotten to see him that one time on the first spring practice, and that's when a lot of attention was being focused on Jordan Washington, who was healthy at the time. And this is maybe one of the ways where you kind of like kick your foot against the wall as a fan or someone who covers the team that there isn't going to be a spring game, because you really would probably like one more look at somebody like that who we might not see a lot of next year or really until the year after. But like we've said, Sark has brought him up now a couple times. Our reporting has indicated that he's playing really well. I believe he did have a drop in the scrimmage the other day for a touchdown. That's obviously going to come as a freshman. But yeah, he looked the part from what I saw when I saw him in person.
You mentioned Jeff Banks pouring into Jordan Washington, and we'd seen that before with Jeff Banks pouring into Jatavian Sanders. Explain what you meant by that when you wrote that article, and then how that may now be something that happens to Amari Winston, considering he seems to be able to handle it. Sark even said today they're teaching him both tight end roles, like the off-ball guy, the move piece, I guess to say, in 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field, and the inline guy, because there's just not enough guys there. So talk about what Jeff Banks was doing when he was pouring into Jatavian Sanders, Jordan Washington, and maybe what that might look like for Amari Winston.
Yeah, you could obviously tell that Jeff Banks, when I witnessed it at practice, he was really spending extra time with Jordan Washington, making sure that he got reps right. So they were going through blocking drills, and what I witnessed, and Spencer Shannon would go through once, Will Randall would go through once, guys like that. Amari Winston at the time, they would do it one time, but Jordan Washington would do it 2, 3, sometimes 4 times. Jeff Banks, and if he didn't like the rep, he'd make it do it again. He was really, he was striving for consistency and wanted to see that from Jordan Washington. Was throwing some expletives around when he didn't like a rep, but when he did, he was very quick to point out that what he did like. I remember one line that really stuck out was he was like, "Nope, you can't block like that if you're going to try to block somebody like Trey Moore." So it was clear that, hey, I have big expectations for this guy because I'm comparing him to one of, our really good now linebacker, but formerly defensive ends, and one of the better pass rushing defensive ends in the SEC in Moore. And so he's clearly trying to build up, Jordan Washington, maybe now Winston, back in the day it was Jatavian Sanders, for the eventual competition that they're going to face on Saturdays.
A couple other of the offensive guys that were mentioned. One was Parker Livingstone, said he continues to play well. The other was Brandon Baker, which is encouraging now that Texas is trying to replace Cam Williams at right tackle, and Baker sounds like he's got a good opportunity for that. But I punted in high school. I know it's a critical position. You don't want to have a bad one. And it was good to hear Steve Sarkisian not only compliment Jack Bomeister, who I think everybody expects to start, but even Michael Curran, who had a rough first year, dealt with injury, wasn't 100%, and yet is now drawing good reviews from Sarkisian for not only sticking around, but doing well now that he's still healthy and on campus.
Yeah, I was thinking that was our first unprompted punting mention that we've had since Ryan Sanborn, or maybe even Danny Trejo. Just in this, more Danny Trejo was like, wow, this guy really saved us, the fact that we even have a punter. But I can't remember when the last time we had an unprompted Sark punter mention was. So I thought that was a good sign. Obviously, Michael Kern was a really talented recruit, and Jeff Banks was former punter himself. He liked what he saw in Kern, recruited him from out of state. Wheels really did seem to kind of fall off that wagon, but they clearly still want him around. So to hear that he is, being able to learn from an older player who's just going to be a 1-year player in Bomeister, then, that's a good sign, obviously. I'm not sure I liked as much what I heard on the kicking side of things, which goes, in line with our reporting, Joe. But yeah, maybe you can take that one.
Yeah, he was hesitant to really talk too much about kicker. He said like, "Oh, I'm going to ramp up that competition in these last few days," which I we'll see. I mean, the portal opens on Wednesday. It'd be I would be surprised to see Steve Sarkisian have two scholarship kickers, two scholarship punters, and a scholarship long snapper on the roster when there are pressing needs at other spots. So we'll see what happens with that competition from Saturday's scrimmage. What we'd been told over at Inside Texas was that Will Stone took a lot of those, if not most of those, kicking opportunities. But that's what happened at the end of the season last year when Stone stepped in the Cotton Bowl, and he only had the chance to kick extra points, but that was very clear what had happened when he was the guy taking those point after attempts. So that's something to watch. For as encouraging as the Kern news is, and with Kern being somebody that Texas wanted to stay, even with bringing in Bomeister, it's you get the other side of the coin when you look at the Burt Auburn and Will Stone side of things. So there are 5 practices remaining. I'm curious to see how the rest of this week, basically these next 7 days, go. Wednesday practice. I wouldn't be surprised if, like they have in recent weeks, they let them go on Thursday. Go for a practice on Thursday. Probably let them go for Easter weekend and tell them to get back on Sunday night before they ramp it up Tuesday, Thursday, and then we'll see what they do. If they have a practice Friday, if they do something Saturday behind closed doors, and then come out to the event. Curious to see what they do, but it's good to see that there are guys at Sark. He could have mentioned Arch Manning. He could have mentioned Anthony Hill, but I think there's something to be said about that emphasis on, like we talked about earlier, building a foundation where you bring these guys in. Brad Spence was someone that he mentioned as well. Just Hero Canoe, Cole Brevard. Those are the guys on the older end of the spectrum. But it kind of feels like with Sarkisian electing to mention them, a little bit of a carrot on his stick, like, hey, young guys, I'll praise you in public if you do some good stuff in private. Look at Warren Roberson, look at Amari Winston, heck, look at these old guys. And maybe that's a little bit of a motivational technique for him to use.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, what we said, Sark will mention you once. What you want to do is get to the point where he says the things like he mentioned about Anthony Hill, where now he mentioned Anthony Hill's playmaking, but he was really talking about what Anthony Hill's doing off the field now. I remember back in the day, he was very clear that when he would talk about Bijan Robinson, he would just say, hey, you guys all know what kind of player Bijan Robinson is. Let me tell you about the type of person he is. And so I think you get to that point. He also, to his credit, he did the same thing with Quinn Ewers last year. He very rarely talked about Quinn Ewers' play. He talked about Quinn Ewers' leadership and, his adversity through challenge, the, adversity that he faced, being able to stick with the program, stick with the team, through some tough injuries. And obviously, if he's talking about Anthony Hill mostly off the field, that means he likes where he's at on the field. In the on-field conversation is really maybe used as a little bit of a motivational tactic, a la Phil Jackson back in the day.
The Zen Master, but the Texas version. Heck, Sark's a Lakers fan. So maybe there's something to that.
Of course.
Yeah, he's from LA. Come on. Before we keep going, got to show some love to our other sponsor. That is David McClellan.
I'm just going to say, guys, you probably need a fiduciary financial advisor. And I've got the guy for you. His name is David McClellan with Forum Financial. He works broadly and deeply with his clients as a financial life coach. And he should know something about coaching because he won several national championships as a swimmer for the University of Texas. He specializes in financial planning and has contributed numerous articles to Kiplinger on the topic of retirement tax bombs. So contact David today to be your fiduciary financial planner and schedule a 1-hour consultation to assess your financial situations. The free consultation is available, so just give him a call. The number is 312-933-8823. That's 312-933-8823. His email is also in the description below.
To end, as we always do, Schadenfreude of the week. And I know one of our loyal viewers is a fan of both UTs, which I find pretty interesting. I'm sure that's I bet he likes hunting season, considering all the orange that's in his closet. But we got to look. I don't think we have to look at Tennessee. Yeah, they lose their starting quarterback, but now they have some cap space freed up to find one in the market. I think the Schadenfreude this week and something Steve Sarkisian was asked about was the Nico Iamaleava situation and how, he may have been and likely is the first super high profile player in college football to just have his bluff called and lose a hand.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked that Sark was willing to talk about it and talk about it by name. I think he said to whoever asked the question, "I don't do hypotheticals," and he addressed it firsthand. He was quick to also bring it back to the state of college football, really pointing out that, hey, did anybody want this when NIL came? And he was very quick to mention how there's still no guardrails in this whole saga. Does anybody like the fact that now we're talking about contract negotiations with college athletes in public, where bluffs aren't being called? I mean, on the Tennessee side of it, like you said, I respect them from saying like, hey, we're not going to do this and moving on. And obviously that speaks to how they think of Nico and what they thought his prospects were for potentially leading the team into another playoff run. But, I think it just really gets back to the state of college football. And did any fan or did any player, did any coach, when NIL got brought up, did anybody really want this to be what everything has turned into? And I wrote an article last week, Joe, for our site, and I said that this really highlights this issue with Nico in Tennessee. It's nothing about him, but it highlights a broader discussion of how recruiting to profile of who fits in at your school, who fits in at your program, who would probably be a student at your school if NIL wasn't a thing, even if maybe they weren't an athlete. And I compared Arch Manning to this Nico situation and how it was clear Arch Manning wanted to be at Texas. Eric Nahlin talked about during his recruitment a lot. If his name was Arch Smith and he was just a fluent kid from New Orleans, he probably would be the type of kid who would go to UT because he fit in there. He wanted to go to school there. And I think you really see those things in contrast with one another, that the first time that maybe there becomes some ruffling of feathers with contract or NIL or payments, Nico clearly didn't want to be at Tennessee. And so he left or was willing to leave, and they really didn't want him. And so it just shows that, hey, even with all this craziness, with the lack of guardrails, you still need to have people who fit your program and your culture and your school. And I just thought that was an interesting takeaway from all of this.
I'm going to bring up a graphic that Hayes Fawcett tweeted out when it happened. Hopefully you can see it. From the bottom, Malachi Nelson, 5-star in the 2023 class, went to USC, got beat by Miller Moss, went to Boise State, got beat by, I think, Maddox Madsen, and now he's in El Paso playing for Scotty Walden. And I think...
Wow, I didn't realize he was there.
Yeah, I don't think that's an NIL problem so much as his quarterback talent did not match up with his physical talent. Jackson Arnold, death by 1,000 sacks and wide receiver injuries, was in a good situation. And then Jeff Lebby leaves. I can't remember his name. They fired him. OU fans want to forget his name.
Seth Littrell. Just every aspect of the OU offense last year did not help him. Now he's at Auburn trying to help Hugh Freeze. Transferred out. Iamaleava. There you see Long Beach, California. And I'm not to say, how do I put this? But I think there is a point to what you're talking about with Long Beach to Knoxville is pretty different. And I know that even Nick Saban would go and get players from SoCal, players from Hawaii, Tua. I mean, there you go. But there's a football culture there, and there's a Nick Saban aspect there that, as good of a coach as I think Heupel is,
I don't think Tennessee has that right now. And I also know, remember what we know about Iamaliva just entering in the first place. Like, he was that quarterback that way back, and I guess it would have been in 2022. It's like, oh, this is the $8 million SEC West Coast quarterback. That's what everybody associated with him. And now we learn that's for good reason, because that's kind of where the family motivation may have come from. And there's so many different rumors swirling right now about, oh, Dan Lanning tipped him off, which I think Homer and Eric talked about this morning, which it would be hilarious if that happened. But there's insinuation from, I know Josh Pate talked about it. I know that it's come out. It seems like it's kind of leaked out from some Vol sites, but that Nico and company maybe went to the collective right before the playoff game and said, all right, we need to, like, you can tell if that is even close to remotely true, where the motivation is. And even if that's not true, you can tell just from this up past weekend where that motivation lies. Dante Moore, a little bit different. Chip Kelly leaves, goes to Oregon, where he was committed to in the first place, gets to sit behind Dylan Gabriel. And then there's Arch. You know, the difference is striking when you're looking at all this. And I think it's also worth noting, you know, On3 kind of gets clowned on for their, NIL evaluations and stuff like that. Here's a point I made about Trey Johnson. Trey Johnson, of course, he liked Texas. Of course, he liked Rodney Terry. He wanted to be a part of that program. But let's not pretend he did it solely out of the goodness of his own heart. And I think for any quarterback, especially at Texas, especially in the modern era, you can kind of think the same thing. Any star player, you can kind of think the same thing. That shows how good it is to have, be interacting with not only well-grounded families of a lot of these players, but also to have a successful infrastructure. And those things all have to come together. And when they don't, for one reason or another, whether it's the program or whether it's whether it's the family, as it is in this case of Schadenfreude of the week, it can all unravel. And now everybody's kind of waiting and trying to see what happens. And it was funny to see, On3, NACO should take a victory lap. Schools associated with Nico are UCLA, which makes, I guess, some sense. Tulane, which kind of shows where the situation has gone. North Carolina. And oh my gosh, I want to see that happen. I want to see this blow up happen, but with Bill Belichick involved.
If that is remotely true, that he has a chance of ending up in North Carolina, then I am doubling down on my theory that the only reason Bill Belichick took that job was so that his daughter could, Freudian slip there, his girlfriend could go through Rush and be a student. Because there is no way that the Bill Belichick that you and I grew up with would be putting up with any of this. I was going to say that, man, Baron Morton all of a sudden has a QB controversy to fight through if Nico is going to end up in Lubbock. But, I don't even know if Tulane and schools like that are being mentioned. Maybe the Double Eagle guys finally look into their wallet and see that there's no cash left to spend on transfer portal comings and goings.
The last thing on Nico, I think I looked, 16 of his 19 touchdowns last year were against teams with an under 500 record. And he was in the perfect offense for him. He's not very, and granted, not a lot of college quarterbacks are great at this. Second read and beyond is not good for him. So you're going to go to UCLA, or you're going to run a pro-ish style offense with Freddie Kitchens still there at North Carolina. My take is that he needs to go to San Diego State, play for Sean Lewis, get whatever money he can, and then put himself back on the market after showing he's a good football player. It's not something he's done quite yet. So it's always fun to laugh at the other UT, but it's sometimes you can give him a little bit of credit while you're doing it as well. So, all right, good Reheat RT. Thank you so much. If you're here, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you have not done so already, head to InsideTexas.com, where just for $1, you can get 4 months of Plus access That gets you all the intel all the way through the spring game. That gets you fan day. Sorry. Gets you all the intel all the way through the transfer portal, which is going to be fun this week. Gets you all the intel past visits, commitments, and even a little bit of fall practice. So make sure you head to Inside Texas today. $1 for 4 months. RT, thank you. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on the Reheat, the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel powered by InsideTexas.com.